It's good to have you with us at this hour. I'm Daniel Che for Arirang News. Let's start with the headlines. The ruling Saenuri Party's internal strife continues. Some of its members are adamant that the current floor leader must step down to take responsibility for creating a rift between the party and the president. Others, however, disagree, and they urge the party to tend to other more pressing matters. For the sixth straight month, Korea's outbound shipments take a dip, but some experts express optimism for the second half, with numerous factors expected to help give the lift to exports. To no one's surprise, Greece defaulted on its debt. Getting another bailout could be a challenge. While the situation has stirred uncertainty in Europe, the impact of Korea will be far less significant. The ruling Saenuri Party's internal feud over the fate of its floor leader Yoo Seong-min has intensified even further, while politicians loyal to President Park are stepping up the pressure on Yoo to resign. Others are defending the floor leader and urging him to focus on the job at hand. Our National Assembly correspondent Park Ji-won starts us off.
Senior lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party who are close to President Park Geun-hye have set an internal deadline for the embattled floor leader's resignation. They argue that Yoo Seong-min should resign by next Monday to take responsibility for creating a rift between the ruling party and the presidential office. That's when lawmakers are slated to vote again on a controversial revision to the National Assembly law that was vetoed by President last week.
You keep saying that he doesn't have any reason to resign. I don't know why he doesn't step down. The current rift between the party and the presidential office is reason enough for him to resign.
But the party is deeply divided over the issue. Five-term lawmaker and Supreme Council member Lee Jae-ho said the party should not make a political scapegoat of Yoo.
We might have some time to discuss this matter after getting through all of the most pressing state affairs. But now is not the time for this. The public doesn't want a fight between the ruling party and the presidential office. I think it should stop now.
Despite the mounting pressure on him to resign, the floor leader has continued on with his regular schedule. He also refused to comment on the matter when questioned by reporters.
I have nothing to say about the matter.
The chair of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Moon Jae-in, criticized the ruling party, saying it has to obey to the will of the public, not that of the president. The party said it would continue to seek ways to strengthen the Assembly's legislative power, even though the ruling party has said its lawmakers will not vote on the vetoed bill next Monday. The proposed revision to the parliamentary law that sparked the standoff between the Assembly and the presidential office allows the parliament to request changes to executive ordinances that are out of step with the spirit of the related law. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the prosecution is reported to have concluded allegations that deceased businessman Song Wan-jung provided legal funds during the previous presidential election and lobbied for a pardon are groundless. While the prosecution is expected to announce its findings on Thursday, media reports say prosecutors couldn't find evidence that slush funds from Song's Gyeongnam Enterprises were delivered to political camps during the 2012 presidential race. They also failed to prove that Song provided money and valuables to politicians and key figures within the presidential office for his pardon in late 2007. A list of current and former political heavyweights left by Song before his apparent suicide in April prompted the prosecution's special probe and forced former Prime Minister Lee Wan-gu to step down. Prosecutors, meanwhile, are expected to indict Lee and Gyeongsangnam-do Provincial Governor Hong Jun-pyo for accepting bribes from Song. President Park Geun-hye has called for South Korea to reopen dialogue with North Korea while maintaining a firm security posture amid threats from the North. At a ceremony to appoint new members of the National Unification Advisory Council, she said Seoul is ready to discuss anything, and that's in time for leadership in Pyongyang come to the negotiating table to find the best ways for the two Koreas to coexist. While urging the North to give up its nuclear development program, President Park said South Korea is prepared to assist the regime if it does lay down its nuclear arms. Here's what she had to say.
북한이 핵을 포기하는 결단을 내린다면 경제와 평화, 체제 안정과 경제 발전 모두를 얻을 수 있습니다. 우리 정부는 북한의 핵 포기 과정에서 함께 추진할 수 있는 다양한 경제협력 사업을 강구하고 있습니다.
Stressing that South Korea will need to end 70 years of division in order to further its position in the world, the president asked the council to lead her government's efforts to prepare for a peaceful unification. Unfortunately, human rights is still a very sensitive issue in North Korea. A state-run think tank reports once again shows that dismal human rights violation in North Korea is a serious matter. The Korea Institute for National Unification says a cumulative 1,382 people were publicly executed between 2000 and 2014 in the north. That's based on the testimony of around 1,400 North Korean defectors, and the actual number of executions may be even higher. In particular, a number of executions were carried out after the people were caught watching DVDs of South Korean dramas or films. This report goes against Pyongyang's claims to the United Nations last January that executions were used for exceptional cases only. The United States is set to announce it has reached an agreement with Cuba to reopen embassies in each other's capital. But the normalization of diplomatic relations is expected to take some time, since the two sides still have a number of issues to settle. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
U.S. President Barack Obama is set to announce on Wednesday that the United States and Cuba will reopen embassies in their respective countries. Citing a senior official, the Associated Press reported Tuesday that Obama will make the announcement at the White House at 11 a.m. local time. A similar announcement is likely to be made by the Cuban government. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to Havana later this month for a flag-raising ceremony to reopen the American embassy. The historic step between the longtime foes follows a December 17th announcement that they would move to restore relations. This was followed by a summit between Obama and his Cuban counterpart Raul Castro in Panama in April. And since then, the two sides have been negotiating the re-establishment of embassies in Havana and Washington. The U.S. cut off diplomatic relations with Cuba in 1961 after Fidel Castro's revolution. But while the opening of embassies marks a milestone in improving U.S.-Cuba relations, problems remain. They include talks on human rights and possible cooperation on law enforcement, including the touchy subject of U.S. fugitives sheltering in the Cuban capital. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
It's official. Greece has defaulted on its almost $1.7 billion loan payment to the International Monetary Fund after Eurozone ministers refused to extend its bailout program. Athens is now seeking a new bailout scheme, but that too is highly unlikely to be accepted by its creditors. For more, we turn to our Han Da-eun.
Last-minute talks were no use in saving Greece from defaulting on its debt. The European Commission, one of the troubled nation's three creditors, along with the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund, urged Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras to accept the bailout terms. But Tsipras responded with a counter-proposal at the last minute, asking for a short-term extension of the bailout program that also involves debt restructuring. Eurozone ministers held an emergency teleconference to assess the new proposal, but their final answer was a no. With the bailout program's expiration, Greece officially defaulted on its $1.7 billion payment to the IMF, becoming the first developed nation to miss a loan payment to the financial watchdog. Greece's credit ratings were slashed to junk status, with Standard & Poor's downgrading its sovereign rating to CCC and Fitch cutting credit ratings on 4 Greek banks 4 notches to restricted default. The IMF, for its part, didn't use the term default and instead said that Greece is now in arrears and can only receive IMF financing once the arrears are cleared. Athens will hold a critical referendum on Sunday that asks the people whether they agree with the bailout terms laid out by the creditors. The Prime Minister and his radical left-wing Syriza party hope to convince Greeks to say no to the terms, saying it would preserve the country's dignity and give Athens a stronger hand in the next round of talks. But the European Commission warns a no vote will mean Greece's exit from the Eurozone and the single currency. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Well, the Eurozone finance ministers, meanwhile, are set to discuss Greece's separate proposals on a €29.1 billion aid program Wednesday. But it's likely to be tough going as Germany, Greece's biggest creditor nation, has said it has ruled out a third bailout until after the referendum. Although the Greek crisis is causing uncertainty in Europe, it seems to be having only a limited impact on the Korean economy. The Greece's default adding to U.S. dollar appreciation, the Korean won fell slightly against the dollar on Wednesday. The exchange rate closed at 1,117.5 won per dollar, down from Tuesday's close at 1,115.5. Meanwhile, Korean stocks ticked up on Wednesday, with Korea's benchmark Kospi closing at 2,097.89 points, up 1.4% from the previous close. Stocks on Wall Street also ended a bit higher on Tuesday, with indexes rising for the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq. Analysts say the Greek crisis won't have much of an impact on the Korean economy, given the relatively small trade volume between the two countries. On to the latest on Korea's MERS situation. The worst seems to have passed. There are no new cases reported in 4 days so far, and the health ministry says this may indicate the outbreak is abating. The number of people diagnosed with the virus have stayed the same since Saturday at 182. There were also no additional deaths overnight, meaning the death toll remains at 33. Of those who have been diagnosed, 2 more people have been discharged from the hospital, taking the number of fully recovered patients to 97. 52 patients remain in hospital, with 12 in unstable condition. Health ministry officials say Korea is still far from declaring an end to the outbreak, as the country still has over 2,400 suspect cases. A Seoul court has rejected a U.S. hedge fund's request to block the merger of 2 Samsung Group units, giving the Korean conglomerate the momentum it needs to proceed with that deal. Samsung C&T, the group's construction and trade unit, has been in a legal battle with Elliott Associates after the hedge fund opposed Cheil Industries' offer to take over the builder for roughly $8 billion. Elliott is Samsung C&T's third largest shareholder, with a share of 7.12%. The proposed merger is seen as vital for a Samsung leadership transition from Lee Geun-hye to his oldest son, Lee Jae-yong. Korea's exports tumbled for another month in June, and yet the figure is an improvement from the month before, raising hopes that the pillars of the country's economy may start to shine again in the second half. For the digits and some expert insights, we turn to our Kim Min-ji.
Korea's outbound shipments fell for the 6th straight month in June. According to the Trade Ministry, exports came to almost $47 billion, down 1.8% from a year ago. Imports fell 13.6% over the same period to about $37 billion. The country posted a record trade surplus of about $10 billion, extending its consecutive surplus run to 41 months. However, what's noteworthy is that the June figures are an improvement from May, when exports slumped nearly 11% on year.
The pace of decline slowed down from last month on the back of the release of new mobile communication devices and automobiles. This increased exports to ASEAN nations. Shipments to the U.S. also grew, as that country is also registering relatively positive economic conditions.
The experts cited the weak Japanese yen and euro as downside risks that could affect Korea's exports in the months to come. Exports have been going downhill this year due to low global oil prices and the weak Japanese currency, which has eroded Korea's price competitiveness on the international market. Looking at the report card for the first half of the year as a whole, outbound shipments slumped 5% on year, while imports fell over 15%. The trade surplus in turn hit an all-time high on a half-year basis. Although it's too soon to say whether Korea's exports will start to pick up in the second half, experts say that stimulus measures in Europe, as well as an overall improvement in global economic conditions, including a slight rise in global oil prices, will lift exports to a certain extent. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Let's talk about national defense now. South Korea's choice of airborne tankers came as a surprise to some, as Airbus beat Boeing for that bid. Our Connie Kim sheds light on how the European aerospace giant's debut in the country will help boost the Korean Air Force's combat capabilities.
It's the world's largest aerial refueling tanker. The Airbus's A330 MRTT is about 59 meters long and roughly 60 meters wide, and it can carry up to 111 tons of fuel, giving F-15K fighter jets that are deployed to South Korea more time in the air. Currently, the jets have only 30 minutes to travel the 320 kilometers from Daegu Air Base in the south to the easternmost island of Dokdo on a full tank, and 20 minutes to fly over the southernmost island of Yeodo. This short amount of time wasn't enough to allow the Air Force to respond effectively if conflict were to break out in these areas. Japan has long tried to claim Dokdo, while the Yeodo Reef is in the air zones of Korea, Japan, and China. But now with the new tankers, a flight duration will be extended to more than 90 minutes over Dokdo and about 80 minutes over Yeodo. In addition, the Air Force will be able to push its range of operations to beyond Pyongyang and Wonsan in North Korea. The Air Force's combat capabilities will also get a boost, as the jets will be able to carry more weapons while using less fuel. 3 companies had competed to win the $1.3 billion bid, with Airbus and Boeing in a tight race at the top. Although Boeing's KC-46A is highly compatible with the US-made fighter jets in South Korea's fleet, the European aerospace giant ultimately won the bid. In announcing its choice on Tuesday, Seoul said the deciding factor was Airbus's higher refueling capacity. The 4 tankers are slated to arrive in South Korea between 2018 and 2019. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
We have come to the end of our newscast. Do join us for more at 10 p.m. Korea time. For now, thank you for watching.